We're not even to the NFL draft for 2025 yet, and we are already ready to start talking about the 2026 class. Now, I know some of you, if you're a degenerate like me, you're in here and you're like, yes, let's go. I want to know what's going on. Then there's going to be other people that comment and say, bro, we have not even gotten to the draft yet. Chill. So much is going to change, blah, 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 blah. I get that. But one, why do you hate fun? Two, I'm doing three now. Two, we need to know how valuable these picks are. So there actually is an important element to this to look ahead and say, if I'm going to be trading my 2026 first round pick or second round pick, I need to know what I'm trading away or what I'm trading for if I trade into the class. Is it a worthwhile trade to make, or is it something that's like you're playing it a little risky? So that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to look into this class and look at how things go. Now, some overview for this class. The quarterback class is a stronger looking class than what we had in 2025. We have Cam Ward, we have Shedeur Sanders, and possibly Jackson Dart as three potential first round picks. The only one that's truly a lock slam dunk at this point is Cam Ward. Seems like Shedeur Sanders is falling, though I still expect him to be a top 15 pick. And maybe Jackson Dart sneaks in. A lot of times there's a quarterback that sneaks in that maybe people have as a second round grade that sneaks in because of their specific position. But that being said, there's not a lot of other upside plays unless you're really in on a guy like maybe Jalen Milroe, or you think what Will Howard did in the playoffs makes him potentially a candidate to be the next Brock Purdy type. But all of that being said, it's really just Cam Ward and then a bunch of hopefuls. So having a much better class for the quarterbacks is a breath of fresh air. Now, we had a weaker, I don't want to say a weak, but I do think a slightly weaker class than what we've had over the past couple of years at the wide receiver position in 2025. That trend continues, and I would say at this point, it is already looking like it's going to be much weaker than what we had in 2025. Now, can guys blossom and bloom? Yes. But at this point last year, we knew about names like Tate McMillan and Luther Burden, and we knew Emeka Ibuka was coming back. When you look at the class this year, there's nobody that really stands out as like, oh, he came back to school, or he's a sophomore that just balled out, but he wasn't draft eligible. Like, we don't have those kind of players, even though we already have some for 2027, like Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. So all of that kind of leads me to believe that we're starting to see a little bit better value at the quarterback spot, but a little worse value at the wide receiver spot. Now let's get to the running backs. Of course, you're not going to likely top what you have in the 2025 class at running back. Although there are some good names, some exciting names, a couple guys that went back to school that are going to be interesting, but overall, it's nowhere close at this point to what we have in 2025 with Genty and Hampton and Henderson and Judkins and on and on and on. A lot of very good, talented running backs in this class. You're not going to have that. There's a couple guys at the top that are exciting, but right now we don't have as much. Now, once again, guys are going to rise. It's going to happen. It happens every year. Players we weren't talking about that are now rising up draft boards. This time last year, we weren't talking at all about Cam Scadaboo. We weren't talking about Matthew Golden. We weren't talking about Caleb Johnson. We weren't talking about a lot of players that are going to be in and around the first round to early second round of your rookie drafts. So we know that guys will skyrocket upwards. It's going to happen. But from what we know now, much weaker running backs, it looks like. Weaker at a wide receiver class that was already weaker than the year before. But we do have a little bit better at quarterback than what we had in this past class. Tight end, there's a couple names that are interesting, but it doesn't look like it's going to be as good as what we're getting out of Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. So overall, I would say right now, if you're trading into 2026, you should not be expecting the same type of value and hype that we've had over the past couple of years. And that says a lot because usually it's always, well, this class is good, but wait till you see next year's class. Wait till you see next year's class. And the next year's class is always better. It's always huge names. This is one of those years where we're not saying that at all. Right now, it is looking a little bit sparse unless you're looking at the quarterback position. That being said, we know that there's still going to be good names. We know that there's still going to be guys that come out of this class that have huge impacts. Even some of the worst rookie classes in Dynasty drafts, we've seen some huge names come out of those classes. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I'm definitely not valuing this class as high as I have the past couple classes, unless I really am looking at the QB position. So with all of that leading up to this, let's get into the actual picks of this 2025 Dynasty Superflex rookie mock draft. First pick off the board, we are taking a look at Arch Manning. Yes, we have been talking about this kid for years. Number one player coming out of his class, but he had to spend some time behind Quinn Ewers, who was the number one guy in his class coming out at the quarterback position. So we've gotten to see glimpses, but we haven't seen a full season under Arch Manning's belt. In fact, only 3 games where he got really any real playing time. He got to play against the University of Texas San Antonio, 9 for 12 and 4 touchdowns, 223 yards to go along with that. 53 rushing yards in that game, which is really interesting as well. Not as great against the University of Louisiana Monroe, 2 smaller schools that he played against. 15 for 29, 258 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, but also had 2 picks in that game. So a little disconcerting there on that. But overall, we were really excited about what he did in the following game. 26 for 31 against Mississippi State, another 2 touchdowns, 33 yards on the ground. He had rushing touchdowns in 2 of those 3 games as well. So we know that he is a good athlete. He's going to be moving around quite a bit, and he's going to offer you that dual threat upside, which I think makes him just infinitely more valuable. Obviously, he's got the pedigree, playing at a big-time school. This will likely be his only year in college football. Now, if he doesn't play well, maybe he comes back for another season. But I think at this point, if he has a big year, we're going to see Arch Manning be NFL bound. Next pick up, we are moving to the running back position, and we're looking at Jeremiyah Love. If you've been scouting this class, this is not a big surprise. Very, very talented running back, currently listed at 6 foot, 206 pounds. This sophomore had a huge year, putting up nearly 7 yards per carry, 163 carries, 1,125 yards, and 17 touchdowns. So big year. He added an additional 2 touchdowns and 237 yards through the air. Huge, huge season for Jeremiyah Love. He's got that good size at 6 foot. Looks like he could maybe even add some more weight and still keep his speed and explosiveness. Not ridiculous wear and tear. You know, we've seen some other guys, some big names. You think of guys like Ashton Genty and Omarion Hampton, that 250, 300, 350 type carry guys in college. Only 163 carries this year for Jeremiyah Love. So plenty of tread left on the tires. If there was anything that makes you go a little like worried, I don't know if I want to say worried, but a little disappointed, is his playoff run was not as good as you would have thought for a team that made it to the national championship game. Good first opening round against Indiana, although I don't think anybody had thought of them as a huge test. 8 carries, 108 yards, and a touchdown, additional 2 receptions. But against Georgia, 6 rushing attempts, 19 yards, only 1 reception. Against Penn State, 11 carries for 46 yards, so not great there. He did get in the end zone, though, and 1 reception. And then Ohio State, 4 carries for 3 yards, 2 receptions for 5 yards. So not a great showing in some of the biggest games of the season. He was battling some injuries during that time, so I don't want to hold it too much against him. But from what I've seen right now, he would struggle to be one of the top 3 or 4 backs in this year's class. So we know that that's a little bit of a downtrend for this year's group. Nico Lamaleava, the dual threat quarterback out of Tennessee. This guy has everything you look for. He's a red shirt freshman this past year, 6'6", 215 pounds. And at 6'6", you're like, oh man, is he going to be able to move? Oh yes. Fantastic athlete, over 350 rushing yards this season, 3 touchdowns, but he really showed that he had the poise to be a good pocket passer at times as well. Now, the Ohio State game, that was a rough one in the playoff, but the rest of the season, had some really, really nice stats. 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. So not gaudy numbers there, but only the 5 picks. You feel pretty good about that. Over a 63% completion percentage in the passing game, over 2,600 yards. So had a lot of very solid numbers for a freshman in this class. I think next year he takes a big step forward. He is losing some wide receivers. He's losing his talented running back in Dylan Sampson. But that being said, I think he's only going to have an opportunity to show more of what he can do with that dual threat ability next year for the Tennessee Volunteers. The fourth pick that we're going to have in our 2026 rookie Superflex mock draft, we're early to it, but we are going with Lanorris Sellers. We've got another dual threat athlete here, and this guy is a fun player to watch. Over 670 rushing yards a season, 7 touchdowns. And remember, those college numbers would be even more gaudy on the ground if quarterbacks didn't take negative yardage for sacks. Like, they don't have that in the NFL. So there's some real dual threat upside with Lanorris Sellers, but he also did some good things through the air. 2,500 yards, 18 passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And he's doing that as a 6'3", 240-pound athlete, a red shirt freshman, Lanorris Sellers. And the South Carolina Gamecocks, we're not talking about some elite receiving option. So he had to do a lot himself. And he showed that in some of his big games this year. When you look at what he did against number 10 Texas A&M, put up 244 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, another 106 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown. Look what he did against Alabama. 238 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Look what he did against LSU. Not as much through the air, only 113 yards, but 2 rushing touchdowns and 88 yards on the ground. In his game against Clemson, 166 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And in his bowl game against Illinois, he didn't run as much, but he did have 260 yards through the air. So he's able to put up some good totals. He's not just stacking numbers against bad teams. He's putting up big numbers in big games, whether it's through the air, on the ground, or both. So Lanorris Sellers, definitely a player that I think is very, very interesting for a dual threat quarterback in next year's class. All right, let's get back to the running back position. A guy that's a junior going to be a senior at 6 foot 225. So he's got that prototypical size, former number 1 running back player in his class. We've got Nick Singleton, put up nearly 1,100 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns this year. That was good for 6.4 yards per carry. So very efficient with what he was doing. Another 375 yards through the air and 5 receiving touchdowns. So he had a monster season, showed a lot, and basically all of the biggest games throughout the conference championship game, which they did lose, but he put up 105 yards on only 10 carries, which is pretty impressive. Another 43 yards through the air and a touchdown, 90 yards on 14 attempts against SMU and a touchdown. Then he had 87 yards on only 12 attempts against Boise State, put up a touchdown, and then 3 touchdowns against that very good Notre Dame offense, 84 yards there, 33 through the air. He really elevated himself through that playoff run. And because of that, a lot of people thought that he was going to be an NFL draft selection. He was not, but he is going to be a very, very highly sought after running back in that 2026 class. We are at pick 6 now, and we are finally getting our first wide receiver off the board, and it's Antonio Williams, wide receiver from the Clemson Tigers, 5'11", 190, and this playmaker found the end zone this past season, 11 touchdowns in this offense. He had 904 yards through the air, an additional 75 receptions. The thing I liked about his game too was he never disappeared, had at least 3 catches in every single game. He played well in a lot of the bigger games that they played as well. We found the end zone against Texas, put up some good yardage totals against teams like Pitt and South Carolina, Georgia. So he was just a player that played big in big games, got the big TDs and the big plays that you were looking for out of him. It's not a super strong class. In fact, we might only see 1 or 2 receivers go in the first round, where we're starting to be used to 4, 5, 6 receivers in the first round. This could be a year where we only have 1 or 2 guys in the first round at the position. That being said, I think Antonio Williams has one of the better shots to be a first round pick. Let's get our third running back off the board. Pick 7, Makhi Hughes, as a true freshman at Tulane. The 5'11", 210-pound running back put up just under 1,400 yards, put up another 1,400 yards this season to go along with 15 rushing touchdowns, another 2 touchdowns through the air. Makhi Hughes is a playmaker. When you have that type of size and you're able to put up the consistency that he was able to show from an early age as a true freshman, you don't see that very often. We think of guys that were able to put up those kind of numbers as a freshman. You're looking at guys like Quinshad Judkins, Adrian Peterson, Travion Henderson, players that are bigger names that we are going to be talking about in the NFL or have been talking about in the NFL. So really, really good numbers for Makhi Hughes. He's somebody that I'm excited about, and I can't wait to dig into his tape a little bit more. Number 8, we're going back to the quarterback position. So quarterback 4 off the board here at pick 8, and that's Drew Allar. He's the quarterback for Penn State. A lot of people thought he might come out this year after putting up over 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Showed that he was a solid athlete as well, putting up over 300 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. However, he decided to go back to school, and I think the lack of the production in the college football playoff really hurt that maybe small urge to see if he could enter this class. I think that kind of confirmed, let's go back one more year and build up our draft stock. He's got the strong arm. He's got the tools. He's got the size that you're looking for at 6'5", 238. Can he put it all together? That's what we're going to kind of have to wait and see. But I think Drew Allar is a very intriguing prospect. A wide receiver, we've got another one here. The 9th pick off the board in our rookie mock for 2026. And that is Mr. Carnell Tate. If you look at the numbers for Tate, nothing overly impressive, 52 receptions, 733 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But let's remember, he was sharing the field with some really, really good NFL wide receivers over the past few years. Guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, and of course, Jeremiah Smith, who's going to be incredible in the 2027 class. But this is a good opportunity for Carnell Tate to really be a bigger focal point in this offense, taking over for an Emeka Egbuka. This will be year 3 for him. He's 6'3", 190 pounds, so he's got the size that you're looking for when speaking about Carnell Tate. And I think he's a player that is going to rise up boards a little bit, especially in a group that is pretty wide open at the wide receiver position. He's got a chance to leave his mark for the Ohio State Buckeyes. The 10th pick off the board, we've got a little bit of a wide receiver run starting here, and it's Jordyn Tyson, wide receiver from Arizona State. Probably the most productive receiver we're going to discuss in this group. As a redshirt sophomore, 75 receptions, 1,101 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Yes, monster season for Jordyn Tyson. And look at some of these ranked games that he played. Against Utah, 5 receptions, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Against Kansas State, 12 receptions, 176 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Against BYU, 9 receptions, 125 yards. This was a very, very good season for our guy, Jordyn Tyson. And at 6'1", 195, he's got really solid size. He's got the big playability. And of course, we're seeing he's got the ability to get in the end zone. He's got soft hands, can make some of those acrobatic catches. Jordyn Tyson is a guy that I could see maybe even moving up and becoming the top wide receiver in this class. At number 11, a guy that went back to school after I thought he might consider declaring for the NFL draft, but Evan Stewart, after being a highly sought after recruit in his class, he's coming back for his senior year, his second year with the Oregon Ducks. Problem for Stewart is he hasn't been overly productive. He's not had a season over 650 yards, including his freshman year. Never had over 5 touchdowns, but there's a lot of the raw skills and traits that you see from him that get you a little bit excited. Now, he did not play in any of the bowl games. The numbers would have looked a little bit better if he did, but there are times that he really flashed and showed some big time ability. Against Boise State, 5 receptions, 112 yards and a touchdown. Against Ohio State, 7 receptions, 149 yards and a touchdown. So he had some really big games against some good teams, but overall in the season, he definitely had a little bit of a disappointing year compared to what I think a lot of people were expecting. However, I think the raw talent and abilities there, and if we can see him get closer to that 1,000-yard mark and closer to 10 touchdowns this season, I think the numbers will match up with the raw ability that Evan Stewart has, and we could see him as one of the earlier draft picks at the wide receiver position in this class. Last but not least, we are looking at our 12th and final player off the board in the first round of our too early 2026 Superflex rookie mock, and that is quarterback Carson Beck. He was tagged as one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the class this year, but had a little bit of a down year this year for the Georgia Bulldogs. Threw for over 3,500 yards, which is a solid number, but 28 touchdowns to the 12 interceptions. So it was less yards and a lot more interceptions. Decision-making wasn't quite as solid for him this year, and he didn't seem to be able to always put his team on his back for some of the bigger games of the season. Yes, he would have some big numbers, like over 400 yards against Alabama, but he threw 3 interceptions against them. You look at against Florida, closer game than it should have been because he threw 3 interceptions, 3 more against Texas. So he had a trouble with some of the better teams and some of the better defenses in college football this past year. And I think that just kind of moved him down a tick. He's now transferred from Georgia to now he's a part of the Miami Hurricanes offense. Let's see if what was done with Cam Ward can be done with Carson Beck to really regain that draft stock.